He defeated horrors of all kinds, but the one monster that The Witcher couldn't defeat was the stupidity of Netflix.
There's no coming back from this.
Before its Netflix debut, The Witcher had everything going for it. A stellar collection of novels and short stories by Sapkowski to draw from, an excellent video game franchise with a massive fan base, and a perfect casting for Geralt. When Netflix rolled out its first season, a lot of the magic that made this universe in the books and video games was muted by writers that had their own stories and audiences in mind. In my first video, I went into more detail about the lore that made this universe great, from authentic medieval European culture and mythology to intriguing politics to complex characters with nuanced storylines. Sapkowski created a mature exploration of mythology and human morality with Geralt as its anchor. The Witcher video games were mostly faithful in their adaptation of this universe and were met with universal acclaim, but the same couldn't be said for the Netflix TV adaptations. Netflix reimagined many iconic characters and injected their own narratives into blundering storylines. Many characters lost qualities that were integral to their roles, looked nothing like their video game versions, and made decisions that their book and video game versions wouldn't make. Geralt was sidelined in favor of characters and storylines that were bland, uninspired, and inconsistent. Geralt's on-screen fate would be a mirror of the battle behind the scenes. There is no doubt that Henry Cavill as Geralt was a match made in heaven. He had the gravitas and charisma of Geralt, and he was an eager fan of the video games and books. But what was a blessing to the fans and the universe turned out to be a curse to the showrunners who had different plans for The Witcher. Henry Cavill's insistence on the lore would ruffle the feathers of the geniuses at Netflix that sought to put their own spin on the franchise. The battle would come to a head when Henry Cavill officially parted ways with Netflix. His departure was mired in speculation that he was leaving to prioritize his role in the DCEU. Then came allegations of toxic behavior on set that simply shrouded the battle against the source material, with Cavill fighting to keep the show true to its source material. The conditions under which Cavill joined The Witcher in the first place would all but confirm why he truly left, for the same reason that many Witcher fans loved this franchise and stood behind him. Netflix found a way to desecrate a fantastic universe, alienate fans of the source material, and extinguish the passion of an actor that perfectly embodied Geralt. The Witcher may yet drag on, but merely as a soulless botchling of what it could have been. Well, let's unveil the ghouls and hags on and off the screen that killed The Witcher and how they managed to clinch defeat from the jaws of victory. Before its first season, Netflix's Witcher sailed on the popularity of the books and games. The showrunners invoked the source material at every turn, parading the Witcher author himself as evidence of their commitment. That's why for many, it came as a surprise that the first season of The Witcher was incoherent and very little like the books and games. Netflix fractured the timeline in season 1 and sidelined Geralt in order to build up Yen and Ciri. While the timelines were linear in subsequent seasons, Geralt would continue to play second fiddle to other characters. This was baffling to any fans that came for Geralt. While Yen and Ciri get rich backstories, the same couldn't be said for Geralt, whose origin we know very little about. Even if it wasn't a focus of the books, the show could have spent more time on his Witcher work, characterizing him along the way and fleshing out this series adapted from rich European mythology. Netflix reimagined the Slavic aesthetics and folklore that distinguished The Witcher from other fantasy in order to push modern metropolitan diversity and themes. This would characterize one of many failures of world building in the Netflix adaptation. Contrary to the beliefs of modern audiences, most parts of the medieval world were far from the ethnically and culturally integrated West of today. More so than today, how people looked indicated their ancestry and environment. How people dressed reflected their culture, and how they built reflected their geography and climate. The Witcher games understood this. Game of Thrones also largely understood this, as the Wildlings and Northerners look and dressed very different from the Southerners. The same couldn't be said for Netflix's Witcher, where diversity is ubiquitous. People from all regions look alike, locations are indistinct, and travel takes only as long as the plot really wants it to. It's hard to make sense of the geography, cultures, and heritage in this world. We've all heard arguments that these changes and race swaps are necessary to reflect the world we live in, and that these actors were indeed the best people for the job. First of all, most stories aren't meant to represent the world we live in, but rather the vision of the original author and the world and work that inspired him or her. Secondly, even if an actor is competent, that doesn't make him or her the best person for the acting job. For example, I enjoy Henry Cavill and have no doubt that he can slay monsters with a sword, but he would be terribly miscast as Blade. There are many more problems with this vacuous approach to diversity that I covered in more detail in my last video and will explore further in a future video. What The Witcher lacked in narrative and world building, it lacked even more in character. Cavill's Geralt looked a little bit different from the Wild Hunt Geralt, but is still the best casting in the show, which says a lot. Freya's Ciri is quite okay, I guess. Anya Chalotra was a competent actress, but lacks the gentle menace of Yen and looks nothing like her. Yen loses her powers in Season 2, losing what made her unique and valuable. She then puts Ciri in danger while trying to get her powers back, something Yen from the lore wouldn't do. Vesemir's actor is competent too, but needed to lay off whatever sauce gave him that constant wide-eyed stare. Vesemir from The Witcher 3 was willing to put himself and his witches on the line to protect Ciri, yet Netflix's Vesemir is perfectly fine with sacrificing her, something Vesemir from the lore wouldn't do. And oh Esco, gone too early while countless pointless characters drag on. We thought we had it bad, but then came Season 3. The writers just really gave up trying with this one. We get a whole bunch of miscast new characters in the same vein as previous seasons, but far less interesting than the witches of Season 2 or the smokescreen of catchy music and a badass sword fight in Season 1. And they really did give this one a big splash of the rainbow.
That was so gay.
Forget the ambiguity of the video games, the alphabet is here and you will enjoy it, dear viewer. The story continues to tease the Wild Hunt and a bigger plot involving Vilgefortz, but meanders through dull subplots of bland characters, filling the runtime with self-indulgent scheming that probably felt very smart to write. I'm left with the sense that the showrunners enjoyed making this one, but the fans of the source material are left with a sloppy product that looks nothing like the world that got them into The Witcher in the first place. Most of the other actors and characters are mediocre, unrecognizable, and downright forgettable. Even with all its shortcomings, The Witcher is still a masterpiece compared to whatever Blood Origins was. Netflix misread the reception of Season 2 and plopped out a spin-off show that nobody asked for and nobody watched. Blood Origins was meant to flesh out the origin of the Witchers, but instead gave us a bungled mess with all the shortcomings of The Witcher and none of the cover to keep it grounded.
The cast are insane.
The action is fierce.
It's got Michelle Yeoh, who is, I mean, you already know that, but she's just incredible.
It's set 1,000 years before The Witcher.
It explores part of the lore of The Witcher that hasn't been explored before.
There are monsters like we've never seen before.
It has the first kiss between two men in the show.
The costumes are divine. The makeup, the hair. Bon appetit.
There's a deaf sign language using character.
Get the fuck out of here.
What are the details that you wanted to see in this show as a Witcher fan? What do you take pride in?
It's, for me, the important thing this season was to bring Geralt as close to the books as the vision and the plot would allow.
Netflix broke the world of The Witcher, and they wouldn't stop until The Witcher himself was broken. Henry Cavill is one of the most underrated actors of the last decade. He has been a highlight of most of the movies that he has starred in. It is no secret that Cavill is a big fan of fantasy who has openly shared his adoration for Warhammer and The Witcher. Cavill did have many fans from his tenure as Superman, but his passion for the Witcher lore and the video games is what endeared him to many fans. Fans were excited to see an actor that cherished the same things that they did about the source material.
You are a legit fan, but to know that the fans have come out in force and validated this first season and are ready for more just must mean the world to you.
Absolutely. It's, you know, when you go into a show like this, or an IP like this, after having played the games and read the books, and I love it as much as all of the fans out there, and so I do everything I can to represent Geralt in the best way possible.
In my opinion, Cavill was a little too young and handsome in contrast to the gruff but-scarred Geralt in the games. He didn't exactly win over all of the fans initially, and even Netflix initially passed on him. But Cavill's passion shone through, and Netflix would eventually make what would be their best decision up to that point by casting him. As a fan of The Witcher, Cavill was excited to bring the best of The Witcher from the books and games onto the small screen. He had a remarkable grasp of the lore and was described as a walking encyclopedia of Witcher knowledge on the set. Cavill was ready to be Geralt for as many as 7 seasons on the condition that Netflix stuck to the lore that he and many fans had come to love. For their part, Netflix promised that they would stick to the lore, locking in Cavill for 3 seasons. But at their first opportunity, Netflix deviated from The Witcher's source material, changing characters and creating storylines that the writers clearly cherished but fans couldn't care less about. The fans noticed all of these changes and expressed their displeasure, as the internet always does. The media clued in and resorted to their rehearsed tactic of demonizing fan bases, hoping to bait Cavill into the legacy media cycle of bigoteering. But as a fan of The Witcher himself, Cavill cut through all the BS to defend the passion of the fans for good source material. The same couldn't be said for The Witcher showrunners, who went to war with the fans, demonizing the many for the perceived thought crimes of the few. To be fair, the showrunner Lauren Hissrich made some concessions, promising to adapt the lore more closely in season 2.
You know, we always go back to the books as our main source. We always go back to the books as our main source.
Horse shit!
But this would be the beginning of a long trend of broken promises that got very old very quickly. When season 2 dropped, it was clear that nothing would change. Leaks would follow from the set of The Witcher that writers actively mocked the source material. In the fall of 2022, Henry Cavill's departure was announced and speculation went wild. Many speculated that he left to focus on his Superman role, which eventually fell through. Then came rumors from anonymous sources that Henry Cavill was toxic to women in the workplace. Apparently, Cavill requested changes to scenes to align them to the source material, which the producers, who were predominantly female, found disrespectful. Fans of popular franchises like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and Marvel know this dance all too well. Fans love source material, writers and producers ignore source material, fans criticize these changes, and producers call fans toxic. Perhaps Cavill's biggest crime was being unapologetic as a fan of The Witcher source material, a fan that wouldn't back down. It is no secret that Henry Cavill was adored by his co-stars in The Witcher and other movies that he previously worked on.
I mean, he's a phenomenal actor, and he's such a gentleman on and off set, and it was always like a dream of mine to be able to work with him. So just in this season, being able to be on screen with him is like a dream come true.
I had a great day on set with Henry, and I think he's just such a lovely person. And such a brilliant, you mentioned such a brilliant leading man, but a leading man in real life. You know, very welcoming, cares a lot about the people he's working with.
An incredible, honor to work with Henry. He brings so much every single day, so much commitment, so much grit. Yeah, it's really quite inspirational, and I'm gonna miss him.
If anything, Cavill's looks and charm garner him more attention than he bargains for. So, on the one hand, we had anonymous allegations of his misconduct, and on the other, we have public figures vouching for his professionalism. Unless all these actors and actresses were lying or under his Axis spell, it is more likely that his departure was linked to something else. If there is any credibility to claims that Cavill was disagreeable, it is likely because he was faithful to the source material, something he explicitly and repeatedly said he would do. The showrunner herself once expressed gratitude for his suggestion to change the death of Geralt's horse, Roach, which had initially been written to be more humorous rather than appropriately sorrowful. If the smears against Cavill indeed came from the Witcher set, they were likely concocted by people that disliked the Witcher source material or disliked Cavill's hesitation to condemn critical fans.
The audience is who this is for.
Yep.
And I listen to them, and I think it's very important to listen to an audience and see what everyone's saying. So even if you didn't nail it the first time, you can start to adjust, you can start to tweak, you can start to sort of caress it into something which does honor to the amazing material that Sapkowski created.
For his part, Cavill stayed diplomatic, but based on the conditions under which he joined The Witcher, it is more likely that deviations from the source material grew too vast for him to stomach. He chose to leave rather than play any role in desecrating a universe that he loved. Netflix lost Henry Cavill, and with him, their best chance at making a successful Witcher. At its inception, The Witcher had only fortune in its future. With rich source material to draw from and successful books and video games, there was no reason to doubt that The Witcher series would be an enduring hit. But repeated departure from the source material and hostility towards the one man that dared stand for it would jeopardize the future of this show. Without Henry Cavill, the best days of Geralt are behind him. There is nothing holding back Netflix from bastardizing the same source material that built The Witcher's fan base. What could have been a long stint of dominant TV will apparently be returning for only 2 final seasons. All spin-offs are likely off the table after the abysmal performance of Blood Origins. To give credit where it's due, Blood Origins gave us a glimpse into the vapid and inspired Witcher universe that the writers wanted to build without Cavill, a universe that died on arrival and proved that The Witcher is nothing without its source material. Cavill will be replaced by Discount Hemsworth, who is a decent actor but doesn't hold a candle to the passion and gravitas of Cavill. The Witcher is well on its way to a long stack of failed video game adaptations. Sadly, the video game franchise that popularized The Witcher might be in tow. If CD Projekt Red's ESG hostage video is anything to go by, the video games might be next in line for some ideologically motivated reimaginations, but only time will tell. For now, the best of The Witcher is firmly in the past. We have Sapkowski's books to read and an epic video game trilogy that features the best of Geralt and pays homage to great European mythology. The Witcher will simply be the latest in a line of cautionary tales featuring excellent source material that is sacrificed at the altar of corporate stupidity and
sheer fucking hubris.
The Witcher is dead. We are simply left with a husk of what it was and the sad vision of what it could have been. That's all for this video. What do you think about Henry Cavill's depiction of the White Wolf? Was getting rid of him the right move for Netflix? What do you think about the future of The Witcher? Let me know what you think down below. If you haven't done so, please consider subscribing and joining the Relentless Fellowship. You stay tuned and stay cool.
There's something really interesting with this character that I find fascinating, which is that he genuinely really does just want to do the right thing. But everywhere he goes, whether it's a new town or a new bar, people just kind of give him a hard time and they rag on him despite the fact that he has great intentions. I'm curious if that's comparable to this sort of world, this culture of toxic fandom, where like if you make a movie, especially if you make a superhero movie, like you have great intentions, but there are always going to be a small yet vocal group of people there can kind of just be toxic.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to fans, it is a fan's right to have whatever opinion they want to have. And people are going to be upset because, especially when you're talking about books or games, because you're never going to be the exact person who they had in their head or who they played on Witcher 3, for example. I don't necessarily consider that toxic. I just consider that passionate.